Always bring the EpiPen. Watch out for Paimon. Check all the corners. Don't piss on a sacred tree. And beware the birthday boy stab man. Welcome to the Mostly Pod Out at Night. Mostly, I am Graveyard, joined by my co-host Salem.
Hello.
This is episode 60 of our weekly All Things Horror podcast. Join us as we venture into the art house side of horror with the works of Ari Aster. And warning, spoilers ahead for Beau's Afraid. I don't know how much we'll be able to dive deep into that movie because it is a weird movie and you kind of need to see it to believe it, honestly.
Well, and also it's like 3 hours long, so there's a lot of it.
Yes.
Hard to explain, and there's a lot of things that are hard to explain, so. We'll go over just the arcing scenes, because there's major scenes, and then we'll go over like what happens in those major scenes. But yeah, to be truthful, you really need to watch it yourself.
Yes. And I'd venture to say this is probably, for just 3 movies, movie time-wise, our longest episode. Because, I think Hereditary and Midsommar are about 2.5 each. And then Beau's Afraid's 3. That's
right.
Decently long movies there, but
for
this
3 movies, yes, total running time, it's very close.
Yeah. So Hereditary, 2018, Midsommar, was that 2020?
It sounds about right.
And then Beau's Afraid came out earlier this year, in 2023. So we'll do our normal recaps of these and get into it. And our out-ofs for this week are Primal Screams because, well, there's definitely Primal Screams easily in all 3 of these movies, multiple times in some of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's kick it off with Hereditary. Like I said, came out in 2018. I would say that at this point in time, A24 was really starting to make a good name for itself for having decent movies. And along comes this film writer, director, Ari Aster, which I don't know anything he did before this. Obviously he directed, this is his first movie he directed. Do you know if he did anything like short films or anything ahead of this?
I'm sure he did. I don't know of them.
Yeah. This is I remember seeing the trailers for Hereditary. I'm like, you know what? I definitely need to see this movie in theaters. And I'm so glad I did. But let's get into it, shall we? So, I think tastefully, like one of the best kind of introductions we see is we see the mother played by Toni Collette, kind of putting together miniatures of their houses. And it seems like a very seamless cut from, their house into her son Peter's room. And then that just scene goes like perfectly into it, the way it was shot and everything. It would remind me of like the miniatures that existed in, say, Beetlejuice to the house. I think kind of worked the same way here. So anyway, they are getting ready to go to their grandmother's funeral. She had died. Oh, they said cancer, I believe.
No, they said she had something, but it was letters, and I don't remember what the letters were.
Yeah.
But I know that she had some level of dementia, and I think it was something tied to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter overall, but.
Right. And, we kind of find out that, that the mother did live in their stupidly nice house for middle of nowhere. And, Toni Collette's character, Annie is giving the eulogy, and, she's like, oh, mother had her secrets. I didn't really know her. I kind of went away from her I don't know how long she said, but they're very surprised by the number of people at her mother's funeral because she's like, I don't know who most of you are. Everything like that. So, she had a very, very fractured relationship with her mother, which kind of seems to be somewhat of a trend in Ari Aster's movies. So anyway, yeah, so she starts going to a support group, bereavement, right? I don't know if she really was sad that her mother died, or she was just doing it out of fear this is something that she's supposed to do.
Well,
But she,
it's some people just have problems dealing with it. Even if it's somebody you don't necessarily like, there's still things to work through there. And I just
Right.
thought, I think that she just felt like she couldn't work through that with her family.
right. And so, she goes there, and that's where we kind of find out that, it wasn't until her daughter Charlie was born that did the mother come back and seem very, very interested in being a grandmother, especially to Charlie.
Well, I think she was trying with the first, because they have two kids. There's
Peter.
mom, Toni Collette, dad, Gabriel Byrne, and then they have two kids, Peter the boy who's older, and then Charlie the girl who's younger-ish.
Right.
I think she's 13.
She's
He's
13.
probably like 16.
16, right.
So yeah, she was estranged, and she was like trying to force her way into her life to see Peter, and she kept her away because she was being real weird about it.
Right. And she does mention, I don't know if it's here or later on, that, she didn't even want to have kids at one point. It wasn't until her mother kind of pressured her into having kids even. And I think at the funeral, Charlie is always seen snacking on something, which you find out, this is kind of like the plot point of, hey, Charlie, make sure it doesn't have nuts in there. You're allergic to nuts.
Specifically, she's always eating chocolate.
Yes.
But she's allergic to nuts.
Correct. And I can understand that. I mean, she eats a lot in this, in her time in the movie. So yeah, she if she's allergic to nuts, she should be a lot more careful out there when she's working on things, eating things. So, anyway, yeah, Toni Collette's kind of going through her mother's stuff, and she wants to start looking at things, but she really doesn't. I think this is the first time we see the symbol, right? It was on her mom's book, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's all. I mean, like, she herself was wearing that symbol as a necklace because her mom gave it to her. She didn't know the significance of it, but she was wearing it.
Correct. So while all this is going on there, does she meet Joan at this point in time in the support group? Is that later on? I think Joan was there.
Well, yeah, she was there, but she didn't talk to her.
Right.
It's the second time that she goes to the grief thing, which is after everything, after the main thing happens, is when she meets Joan.
Right. So anyway, she's working on, I guess she's doing an art gallery for her miniatures, that she's really good at it. Meanwhile, her husband, Steve, gets a phone call saying, desecration of what? Well, what's that mean, right? Yeah, thank you. And Annie's like, what was that? He's like, oh, no, don't worry about it. So things seem to be kind of normal going on there. We see Peter kind of in school, seemingly, interested somewhat in class, more interested in the girl in front of him, and he gets invited to a party. And, he's like, he asks his mom, hey, can I go to the party? She's like, there better not be any drinking there. It's like, I'm not going to drink. I'm not old enough to buy booze. You better not be drinking. It's like, I'm not going to be drinking, even if I could. Well, bring Charlie with you. All right. Because, he's like, he painted it as like a school party for everyone from school's going to be there. So bring Charlie with, you are kind of in charge of her. And then we see at the party, girls making a chocolate cake, and we see I would say exorbitant amount of peanuts being chopped up.
Those are walnuts.
That size.
Dude, are you not aware of what nuts look like?
I don't eat nuts in food, let alone in chocolate cake.
Those are walnuts.
I'm saying there's a lot.
Yes, there's a lot of them. One,
Yes.
they're walnuts. Two, who puts walnuts in a chocolate cake?
Right.
I mean, okay, I can understand you doing that, like, as like a chef or an experiment or something like that. But like
At a party?
drunken teenagers at a party, like making chocolate cake, I can totally see a bunch of high kids making a fucking cake.
Yes.
Putting nuts in the cake, like really?
With a nice ganache across it.
Yeah, it's like I would have never crossed my mind to put nuts in a fucking cake. It's a lot of work for a cake.
Right. So Peter's like, hey, I got some good weed. Brings, the girl he likes in there. He starts smoking a bong. And Charlie does what Charlie does as she eats the cake. And then she starts having an allergic reaction to it. And her first reaction is to drink water. Then she eventually gets Peter. Like, I can't breathe. My throat is swelling up. And he's stoned out of his mind trying to drive her to the hospital. And he is not paying attention, because, Charlie's going to anaphylactic shock in the back seat, so I'd be freaking out too.
I wouldn't put this on him.
No.
Okay, the two things happen here simultaneously, neither one of which is his fault. One, Charlie, his throat is closing, so she can't breathe. So she rolls down the window and sticks her whole like upper body out the window to try to like force air in her lungs, right?
Yes.
And then while that's happening, Peter sees a dead deer in the middle of the road and swerves to avoid it.
Yes.
Okay, two normal-ish things that happen.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. I didn't want you to paint Peter as being the like the bad guy here. I think even though he is definitely driving under the influence, I don't think it was. Even if he was sober, I think the same thing would have happened.
Right. I was just painting that way because of how his mom reacts. She does paint him as the villain in it later on. But yes, you are correct. He's not doing anything necessarily wrong. He knows what's going on with his sister. He's like, hey, I get her to the hospital. But, all of a sudden, boom. I don't think we see what happens. We just see her head going towards the pole. And then him trying kind of driving back. Right? We don't.
I mean, there's a pretty nasty.
I don't think we see it.
Squish.
Well, yes.
Scene. I mean, you do see it. It's like a very short.
Yeah. I believe we also see that as on the pole is that sigil as well.
That was on the way to the party.
On the way to the party, yes.
On the way to the party, they showed that symbol,
which is interesting. That is all kind of obviously leading up to that, but Peter has to know what's going on there. Is just in so much shock that he just drives home and goes to bed. And then, the mom's like, hey, I'm going to go take the car. And then she gets the gut-wrenching scream as Charlie's decapitated torso and body is now in the car. And then I believe we see her head then on the side of the road.
Covered in ants.
Covered in ants. We get kind of the full picture of it. And I will say this right now. When they're at the funeral, they're like, hey, make sure it doesn't have nuts. We don't have your EpiPen. And once again, hey, you're going to a party with people you don't know. Once again, you don't have an EpiPen. I feel like they don't have an EpiPen for Charlie.
I mean, they do. It's probably in a drawer at home. But I mean, again, Charlie is 13.
Yes.
She can carry around her own EpiPen. If she has an allergy that's that dangerous, she can handle it herself.
Correct. Completely agree. So anyway, Annie gets, very grief stricken, and Peter is very upset by it. His mom's very upset by it, and, Annie is starting to take stuff out a little bit on Peter. And I will say that the dad is being very calm and collective. It's like, hey, I'm also trying to protect my son. I think the dad realizes it wasn't necessarily his fault. or anything on purpose. It's just he's a
Well, I mean, yeah, it's one. It's your own fucking kid.
right.
You know the kid didn't murder his sister on purpose, right?
Right.
Especially not in that kind of fucking scenario. And the mom, I think the mom knows that too. It's again, that's why she went to grief counseling. She doesn't know how to process her emotions. And the only way that she knows how is, like she said, the way that her mother did was through anger and yelling and,
Right.
being secretive, which is again what her mother did. And she is also guilty of that. Not in the same degree, of course, but
right.
We are our parents.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, of course, she's dealing with it in the same way. That's ultimately that's what he's saying is he's trying to protect his son from her outbursts and her also emotionally damaging him by potentially blaming him and shit.
Right, because Peter isn't okay. He's not happy. He's not normal after this. He's
very obviously having like weird panic attacks and shit and like weird kind of freak outs. I mean, they increase later on. We'll get into why, but this is even before anything else occurs, and he's already like panic attacks and like bad things are happening.
Right. So kind of anyway, this is where she starts talking to Jones. She's like, hey, this is, my son and 7-year-old grandson died in a car crash, I believe. So you kind of just get through it one day at a time. It doesn't get, it gets easier, but they're never forgotten.
They drowned.
So, yeah. So, they drowned.
Yeah, Jones' son and grandson drowned.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
It was in a car.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't matter. She's just trying to commiserate with her. That's all.
I'm not sure they existed to begin with. So
yeah, very true. Who knows?
So anyway, she starts befriending her, and she always says that she's going to go see a movie, which I don't think there's anything wrong with her saying, "Hey, I'm going to this support group." I think the father, her husband, would have been very receptive to it instead of being suspicious about what movie she's seeing.
Well,
as he gets suspicious later on.
Well, again, it goes to my point is that she is like her mother. She likes having her secrets.
Right. Right. So anyway, she starts talking to Joan more and more. And then, she just happens, she's like, hey, you got to continue this, your miniature work. The gallery's looking for this due date, because Annie starts even doing the, Charlie scene, the accident scene, right? With the light pole and head on the ground, everything like that. So she's still.
Well, I'm pretty sure she's processing her grief by making miniatures out of all the situations that are making her sad or upset or emotional. Because she did it with not only that scene, but there's like scenes of her like in a hospital room with her mother. Like there's a scene of her sleeping in bed with her mother, like standing in the doorway. These are obviously like scenes that caused her a lot of emotional distress, and I think that's how she.
Yeah. So anyway, she happens to get more paint supplies or art supplies, and she runs into Joan. She goes, "Hey, so talking about this whole seance thing." He's like, "Hey, there was a scientist there, and he's like, he didn't believe it, and here's kind of what we did." And they proceed to have a seance where, like, hey, move this cup, to the left or to the right for yes, to the left for no, and the cup moves around. First like, okay, she's Joan's moving it, and no, then starts moving by itself. And he kind of is looking for like some sort of trickery to this. And she's like, hey, I use this chalkboard because this is what he liked to use. So if you find something of Charlie's, you can do the same thing. So Annie does this with Charlie's sketch pad that she had, and wakes up Peter and her husband Steve to go through this. And she's like, hey, before you can do anything, you have to read this summoning spell essentially first. So they start doing it, and things start moving around. Then kind of Charlie's voice comes out of Annie's mouth and is kind of possessed until the husband throws water at her. She's like, hey, you know what? This is taking long enough. You're freaking Peter out because Peter has another huge panic attack after hearing his dead sister's voice coming out of his mom's mouth. So anyway, after that, Peter starts seeing, what would you call it? The light. Would you say?
I guess. Oh yeah, it's like sure, a light.
Fairy fire? I don't know.
Well, it did something like that.
Something like that, right? And I think just things start happening more and more. I think this is where the mom starts like, Peter sees stuff in his room, like his grandma. I think I think his mom's hands reach out from behind his headboard and starts like choking him. And he's like, "You're trying to choke me," blah blah blah. I think this is where we find out that Annie had a dream where she was like soaking her kids in kerosene.
Well, that's the thing. The way that she talks about this, she talks about she covered the kids in paint thinner, and then covered herself in paint thinner, and then she had a box of matches and she struck the match, and she apparently woke up as she was striking the match. But the way that she like stops herself multiple times during the telling of this story to specifically say, "I was asleep. I was sleepwalking," like defending herself so hard. I don't know. I got the feeling that maybe she wasn't actually sleepwalking.
I don't think she was sleepwalking.
Yeah, the way that she was saying it, the way that she was defending it. I think the way that they filmed it that way so that you didn't know what was going on,
Right.
Because again, at this point in time, they're trying to show that Annie is the one that is unstable and may be responsible for this other kind of freaky stuff that's going on.
Right.
I think that was just another nugget to add on to. I don't think something's all there with Annie.
No.
So I mean, she very well may have been sleepwalking. I don't know. I'm just saying the scene, the way it's portrayed in the scene, it's like she's very, very defensive to the point where it's like, I don't think you were sleepwalking.
No. So anyway, as more and more spooky stuff starts happening, Annie's like, hey, you know what? This is done. I'm going to throw this sketchbook into the fireplace, and it's starting to catch fire. So does she. Seemingly linking herself to like, hey, if this book burns, I burn with it. So she pulls it out, stomps on it, and the flames go away. And she's like, okay, this is beyond weird. And then this is when she made a comment when she went to Joan's house, like, oh, my mother used to make welcome mats just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then her, Joan, who claims to be new to her life, it's like, oh, that's weird. What a quinky dink, right? So anyway, as she more and more is going on, she sees her mother stuff starts going through it, and she sees we see the sigil that is there, and we see pictures of her mother, and I even think the summoning spell is in the book as well. And all of a sudden she's going through these picture books like, oh, look, here's Joan with a whole bunch of other people that were at the funeral. Oh, and here's this Paimon thing. He, talking about how he has to inhibit a male host.
Well, he doesn't have to. He prefers it.
He prefers it, yes.
And he's not giving you rewards until he gets one.
Right.
And also in all the pictures, they're all wearing that same necklace, that same symbol that has shown up.
Joan has it as well. And she starts talking to to Steve about it. He's like, okay, you're going a little crazy. This is just weird. She's like, how can it be the same? And we don't know if she's awake or not, but she starts seeing, I assume, awake for all the ants that are crawling down her wall from the attic. She goes up there, sees a symbol on the wall, and sees her dead mother decapitated and the ruins all over right? And she goes down. While this is happening, no, yeah, while this is happening, Peter's at school, still clearly not okay. You know, the light is kind of going everywhere, the fairy fire, whatever you want to call it. He's at lunch, and we see Joan calling out to Peter and saying, like, get out, spirit, get out. And only, like, Peter can hear her. And then kind of something just goes and snaps, right? He's in class.
Well, yeah. So he basically gets, like, manipulated, controlled,
right.
like a puppet master is moving him, and he has no control.
Right, and starts bashing his face against his desk.
Right.
Breaking his nose. You know, Annie's not answering the phone, so Steve has to go take him there. He's like, all right, this is clearly not okay. This has to stop. And so, you know, she's like, hey, Steve, you need to go check the attic. Go check the attic. He's like, all right, goes up there. He's like, oh man, this is not good. You know, Annie, I think you sleepwalked and dug up the grave, because I got a call a couple days earlier saying that it was, you know,
well, yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, I don't think at this point he was not accusing her of sleepwalking. He was saying that all of this is her.
Yeah,
all of this is you. Like, you did all this. You're the cause of all this. So
right.
He was basically just at this point, like, trying to, like, figure out what he can do to, like, diffuse her, because she's obviously, like, all jazzed up.
Yeah.
And she had tried to burn the book, Charlie's book, that was, like, you know, the medium, whatever kind of connection. And her sleeve caught on fire when she threw the book in the fire.
Yeah.
So she basically realized that she is somehow connected to this book. So once that happens, she tries to get her husband, Steve, to throw the book in the fire, because she's not strong enough to do it herself.
Knowing that she will burn up.
Knowing that she will burn up. She's trying to sacrifice herself to save Peter.
Right.
Like, he won't do it. At this point, he's like, no, like, you're sick. You need help. Like, we need to, like, get you out of here. I'm not participating in this anymore.
Right. I went along with you for too long.
Right. Yeah. So she grabs the book and she throws it in the fireplace, and then Steve catches on fire, and not
he
her.
more than catches on fire. He is just lit up. He's like engulfed.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Then she, like, has this look of absolute horror on her face, and then we see the light flash, and then she just immediately drops all emotional, you know, look at all, and just, you know, as like a blank face, and then just walks.
Yeah. Anyway, this is, you know, we're in the final act of this movie. We start seeing, you know, naked people surrounding their house. Peter kind of wakes up from his, I would think heavily drugged after breaking your nose open like that.
I don't think he was drugged, because the school's not going to give him any drugs. I don't think he was drugged. I think it was just extremely exhausting, and he knocked himself out. And he was still knocked out when they brought him home.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure he was just out. And again, I don't think that was from hitting his head on the desk. If it was, he has severe brain damage.
Yeah.
No, I think it was just exhausting, the whole thing.
Yeah. So anyway, he's trying to find his mom and dad. He walks up. We see Annie kind of like creepily crawling along the ceiling, getting in the corner. He sees his dad there, and then all of a sudden Annie starts chasing him. He goes up to the attic, and you seem pretty clear. And we see, like, the difficult now demon possession in movies where they just bang their hand like 50 times against the wall or a door. While he's hiding there, there's more naked people in there. All of a sudden, his mom is now also up there and starts taking off her own head with piano wire. While that is going through, you know, people start coming after Peter. He jumps out the, I'd say, third story window.
Yeah.
And he does that. Orb kind of enters him. We hear the song finish up. Then, you know, the head's decapitated. He goes into the treehouse that Charlie was always liked to be in there, and she'd go sleep in the treehouse. When she was upset or scared, he entered it. He sees a whole bunch of more naked people who are worshiping the Charlie's head on a mannequin. He sees his mother's dead body, and maybe his grandma's as well, decapitated, bowing down. And they go, "Hey, Charlie," they're calling Peter Charlie. We finally have the suitable host for you. Put the crown on from Charlie's head onto Peter's head, and he is now King Paimon. The end.
Right. But Paimon being one of the lords of hell.
Yes.
So this is a bad entity, not a good one.
Correct. I'll go with my first thoughts. So I saw this in theaters in 2018. I know this is when you started getting back into horror movies. It was about this time frame as well. I thought this movie was really good. I think it had, their creep factor, kind of had you watching stuff in the background. And as far as jump scares are concerned, it didn't rely on them because it's not a PG-13 horror movie.
Well, you don't have to be a PG-13 horror movie to do that. It's just a very easy thing to put in a horror movie.
Right.
To get people unnerved and on, edge.
Yeah. After watching it, I've watched this, I don't know how many times, half a dozen times at this point in time, maybe more. It's good every single time. I don't think it loses anything on any rewatch. What was your first thoughts on this when you watched it?
It's interesting. The event of the head, Charlie's head happens pretty early on in the film.
Yeah.
The movie's a little over 2 hours long, and I think the head part happens 30 minutes in.
Oh, easily.
So, that's how heavy this movie gets, pretty much right away.
Yes.
And it doesn't really lift. Obviously it's not action packed or anything, but that that kind of that feeling that you get where kind of dread,
yep,
this is leading up to bad things and you don't know what, that just keeps going for the whole rest of the film.
Yeah, there's no comical reprieves in this.
No, not at all. That's basically what I got out of it was wow, this is intense.
Oh yeah. And atmospherically, it was great, and that's I'll go in my highlights. Atmosphere, fantastic. Transition pieces, great. The sense of a broken family and the loss of harder for a child dying than your grandma that barely was in your life until you had kids. And so that is, as you said, very hard hitting. Okay, this movie's not fucking around. And acting, I think the acting in this was spectacular. What about highlights for you?
I'll just say, the acting is great in this. I think Toni Collette is one of those. Obviously she's been nominated for Academy Awards and stuff. It's not like people don't know that she's a good actress. It's just she hasn't won any major awards, and I think that's a shame. I think she's fantastic at just about everything that she's in. I think she needs more recognition for all the work that she does. She does a little bit of everything though. So she does a lot of goofy movies. It seems like she just does everything that they throw at her pretty much.
Right.
But she can do every role and do it well.
Yes.
I think she got nominated for an Academy Award, I think, for The Sixth Sense.
Yes.
Which is, she was great in that movie, but she wasn't the main character in that.
No, she's lots of maybe maybe 10 minutes, if that.
Right, but she's been in a lot of other movies where she was the main character, where she did outstanding performances. And I don't know. I feel like she gets looked over way too often because I think she's fantastic. She's fantastic in a lot of movies. Anyway, but yeah, everybody else did great. Peter seemed sweaty all the time, but he is a 16-year-old, so I guess 16-year-olds aren't sweaty all the time.
Yeah.
Gabriel Byrne is Gabriel Byrne, but I think he played a good kind of dopey.
He was a good
dad character,
a straight man. He didn't buy into anything. He was just a normal person. Like, he was just trying to hold it together as a father and not dive into any delusions and just protect his family. Yeah.
But all around, it's good. I like the art in the movie. I mean, not only her little miniatures, which I thought were pretty cool. Because there's a lot of those. There's a lot of scenes that even like have like the fade in and outs like show her from like her miniatures and stuff, which is pretty cool. But I mean, just the art all around in there. Like Charlie makes these weird little sculptures that were pretty cool. I mean, just the art style all around in the movie, I thought was pretty good. Just, I mean, the cinematic way that things are shot, I mean, there's just like, some weird shots of like, cars sometimes upside down. I mean, there's a lot of, like zooming in, zooming out, panning around. I mean, it's like I said, it's very like art house horror, I mean, it's very much done, for the art of how it looks, even more than the horror element, the scary element.
Right.
It's like that. I think they're both there in equal parts. I thought that the cult influence was pretty cool. Again, you're seeing this kind of subtle cult influence compared to like, the Conjuring crap that we just came out of with like their cults are just like, going 120 miles an hour in the red all the time, like super Satan murder everything. So we're like real cults, if they did exist, would have to be subtle because obviously no one has ever found one. So if they did exist, they would be very subtle. And just like this, like, lady's own daughter, like she was like the head of the whole cult and the daughter had no idea it even existed.
Right.
Like that's the level of secrecy that they had. And that's the level of secrecy they would have to have.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's just nice seeing like something that's, more realistic. Obviously it's supernatural and there's like it's still a demon involved, but it's, in such a way where it's not so heavy handed as like the Conjuring is. They actually like, there's nuance to it. Whereas like the Conjuring is just like, a big rock dropped on your hand.
Well, I mean, and the demon is a flash of light. That's it. Like,
well, yeah, like, yeah, there's no, like, the demon doesn't do anything bad. The demon is just like an entity that wants to come back to the world or wants to come to the world. I don't know. They don't talk a whole lot about it. It's like you see like one picture of it and its name and then it covets a man body, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end they say his name and that's it. That's like, that's the extent of it. You don't get a background of like who this character is or whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't ask him his name in a dream or anything.
Right. What about low points for you?
Low points. I don't know. I noticed this the first time I watched the movie, and I noticed it again this time. Gabriel Byrne does not know how to chop carrots.
No.
Okay, like he's like making dinner, right? And you can tell they've been doing this scene for a while because like all the carrots on the chopping board are cut into like minuscule, like little tiny slivers, right? Like he's been doing the chopping scene over and over and over again with the same carrot.
We don't got a second bunch of carrots.
Right, we don't have a second carrot. Keep working with that one. So it's like you can see there's like a couple of chunks of carrot that are there for like, visual, I can tell. But the carrots that he was actually chopping are like literally down to like their atoms almost. It's like smeared all over the place. And then if you look in the dish that he's putting the carrots in, very clearly you can tell that they just cut off the end of the carrot and threw it right in. So like anybody who was actually cooking would know that you don't put the end of the carrot in the fucking dish. Why would you bother chopping it up then?
Right.
So yeah, it's very obvious that Gabriel Byrne was not actually cooking and did not know how to cook, or at least not in that scene.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to call out as saying that it was bad. High school. I hated high school.
Yep.
This like brought back bad memories of like how much I hated high school and how stupid it was. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with the movie. It was just my own feelings on high school. And I'm going to say something. This doesn't pertain to this movie at all. I'm not going to say, because this movie pulls it off. This movie relies very, very, very heavily on actors' performances, right?
Yes.
If these actors' performances were not as good as they were, this movie would not be anywhere near as good as it is.
Oh, yeah.
Now, and this movie does what? It pulls it off. It does a great job. I'm not specifically calling out this movie. I just noticed it in this movie saying like, wow, if these people did not pull this performance off, this movie would be terrible. And it just, why do movies do that? Why do they put everything on one single performance? You know, like just spread it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to put all the writing on like one performance, one monologue, to where like if they don't pull off any part of this thing, the movie's gonna suck. But anyway, again, this movie does that, but it pulls it off. It does it well. I'm not saying that this is a bad part for this movie. I'm just saying this is a bad part for movies overall. I had to stretch because there's not really much I don't like.
Yeah. Any other little points?
Nope.
Okay. Like I said, it's earlier for me, the EpiPen stuff. Like if you're going to die, like she probably is the type of nut allergy that if she touches it, she might die. To not have an EpiPen, as we pointed out, she's 13. Carry damn EpiPen.
Yeah, it's like you got pockets. you know, you got pockets. You carry out a fucking backpack or a purse or something. You know, yeah. Like if you have anyone, literally,
right,
anyone that has an allergy that they know of. I'm not saying people have allergies that sometimes they don't know of. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm not obviously not saying anything there. But I'm saying, like, if you know that you have a severe nut allergy, like, what happens if you were accidentally exposed to this?
Right.
You know what I mean? What if you're like walking and somebody accidentally dumps a pot of peanut butter on your head? I mean, is it likely to happen? No, but I mean, if there's a non-zero chance that this might happen, you should be ready for something.
Right, and that's the point. If you're going to a party with people you don't know, with food you don't know, you're bringing your fucking EpiPen.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're like, well, why didn't she ask if it has nuts in it? Like, she was obviously very, very socially anxious, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
She was like afraid to even ask for a piece of cake. I get why she wouldn't ask if there's nuts in it. Like, again,
right.
She didn't really seem all that bothered about, you know, eating things that may have nuts in it. It was the people around her that were more concerned about it.
Right.
Probably because they've been shielding her from it for so long that she doesn't really think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very solvable thing, is that you just get a few EpiPens and make her carry one on her at all times.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much my low point. It's just that. Obviously, it's a plot point to move the movie forward, but yeah, it's easily remediable, but all right. So, number of primal screams out of 10. I'll go first for this one. 9 primal screams out of 10 for me. This is a solid movie, and it stays solid to me on every rewatch of it. How about you?
It is a great movie. I don't know if I'll go quite as high as 9, but I will go pretty high. I'll go 8.5. 8.5 primal screams out of 10.
Yeah, as you said, if it was any other cast, probably would have bombed horribly.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's this movie. I'm just saying movies in general sometimes do that, and then sometimes they fail miserably. Sometimes they knock it out of the park. That's what they do.
If this was the actors playing Ed, Lorraine Warren in The Conjuring, I don't think this would have done it well.
No, not at all.
All right, sir. Why don't you then go ahead and bring us through Midsummer. How do you?
Midsommar.
Midsommar. Yes.
Yeah. Say it like you're Swedish.
Yeah.
All right. So essentially, we're introduced to the lovely Florence Pugh, who is, in the beginning of the film, is worried about her sister, because her sister sent her this weird kind of dark email saying that, like, oh, I'm going to this dark place. Mom and Dad are coming with me. Goodbye.
Right.
And I guess it's happened before. Her sister's like bipolar, as you know, we find out as through conversation. But she's always the one that has to deal. And so she's like trying to call her parents, can't get through. She's at college, obviously far away from them. We don't know how far, but far enough where she can't just go. So she doesn't know what to do. She's calling her boyfriend, and her boyfriend is, receptive, but also like, kind of just wanting to be doing his own thing, hanging out with his friends at the time, right?
Yeah.
And his friends are also like, dude, like you said, you're going to break up with her for like the last year. How come you haven't done it? And he's like, oh, I will. I just haven't gotten around to it. So anyway, so we cut back to her, like, trying to contact everybody. And essentially we get this scene and shows what's actually going on. Like, as the emergency first responders get to the scene here, is that the sister has taken garden hose and duct taped it from the exhaust of both the cars in the garage, and then brought one hose all the way up and stuck it underneath the parents' bedroom door, and then duct taped that closed. And then the other one she put in her own mouth and then duct taped it to her own face. And of course the cars are running. So, like, she killed herself and killed the parents in the same move. I mean, just brutal.
Yeah, this is opening scene.
Yeah, this is the first thing that happens in the movie, and you're like, wow, this is bad. I mean, and they show the whole thing. Like, they show them pulling the hoses out. They show them turning off the cars.
Yep.
They go into the room. Like, you see her, like, dead with the hose duct taped to her face, and there's like literally like puke like dripping out of it, all dripping down her. I mean, it's gross. It's not good.
Oh yeah.
So of course, like, she gets a call from an unknown number after she calls her boyfriend again. And she gets a call from an unknown number. She answers it, and it's the police letting her know what's going on. So the boyfriend comes over, and she is just, I mean, it's the primal scream, right? It is like every ounce of her soul is like sobbing at this point, which you gotta understand. It's like her whole family just died in one shot, and her sister did it. So obviously very, very bad. So then then we get the credits. So the opening credits have not even happened. So we get the opening credits of the movie. And it cuts forward, I don't know, a few months. It doesn't say exactly how long, but a few months fast forwards. I mean, I guess in the beginning it was like winter outside.
Right.
So, and now it's like June. So, what, 6 months? We'll say 6 months.
I'd say 6 months.
So now she's kind of sort of in a better mood. She's obviously not, sobbing all the time, but you can tell she's obviously not doing well, right? And she seems to be like even more clingy to the boyfriend, which, I mean, again, you've been through something like that. Yeah, you're not gonna come out of it the same. But she's probably still in like a mourning period anyway. So they end up, going to a party. And she finds out that his group of friends, which is, there's three guys. One's a Swedish guy. What was his name? Like Hella or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then her friend Mark, and then her friend, I don't remember the other guy's name. I'll call him Cheaty because that's his name in The Good Place.
Yeah, that's the Cheaty and eyebrow
Cheaty.
kid.
I don't remember what his name is, so we'll call him Cheaty.
Eyebrow kid.
Yeah, an eyebrow kid. Yeah, so Cheaty. Well, I remember his name is Mark in the movie. I don't remember his real name. Anyway, so they all decide, and her boyfriend. So there's 4 of them total. They all decide that they're going to go to Sweden because the Swedish guy, he has this like, midsummer festival, that, his village that he comes from has like a very special thing, and he invites them all to go, and all the boys were going to go. And of course, the boyfriend being, the indecisive, like, wants to make a decision, but can't tell his girlfriend about it, that we saw that he was before, but apparently that has not changed. He has told them that he is going to Sweden with them, but he has not yet told her, even though he's leaving in less than 2 weeks.
Right.
So she's like noticeably like upset, like, hey, like, you can go, but like, you should have talked to me about it. Like, it's less than 2 weeks. Like, you're going to be gone for like 3 months. We need to have a conversation about it. So she's trying to just talk to him about it, and he's being real defensive and goofy. And, again, it's just a young relationship of, frustration. So where it's obviously they're probably shouldn't be together, but they are because they're
not toxic. but not happy.
It's toxic. It's not good. But anyway, so eventually, so they go back over to the house, to discuss, and he basically walks in and he's like, okay, guys, well, the only way I could get her to like shut up about it is I told her that she was welcome to come. Like, she's not gonna come. But
bro,
like I had to
what's up?
yeah, I had to like invite her just so she'll like calm down. And they're like, okay. And so she comes in there, and they're like, oh, so you're going to Sweden? And she's like, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm gonna go. And so like, as they all realize that she's actually going to go to Sweden, they all kind of leave. Like, Mark goes, hey, I got to talk to you about this paragraph on my laptop. And then he goes to walk in the other room, and he doesn't even bring the laptop with him at first. He like thinks about it and then goes back and grabs it. But like, obviously he's not talking to him about that. Chidi like gets up and walks away to the other room. The other one that doesn't really have anything against her, just sits and actually talks with her, is the Swedish guy. And he seems like he's like genuinely happy that she's going to go.
Right.
And that's like maybe too much, maybe a little too much. But at this point, it's just friendly. So we basically cut forward to them arriving in Sweden.
Yes.
We show them arriving. They like drive for 4 hours to get to, Pella's like little village, but they like stop in the middle of the woods and then do a bunch of mushrooms.
Yep.
Before they get there to like, I guess, light you up a little bit. So of course, like, she freaks out, has a bad trip, and passes out, but she wakes up and it's still daytime because it's like, it's Sweden. And so it's, what they call it, like the midnight sun. So where like, it stays light for days at a time. Because they're apparently very far north. Anyway, so they finally get to the main kind of village, right? And everybody seems very friendly, but they're all wearing like very kind of cultish white robes. But they're just kind of described as, this is like our, attire that we wear for this festival. We all, all make it ourselves, and it's all a big, we're all very into this. That's why we do this. Which I'm pretty sure they dress like that all the time, but they specifically say they only are doing this for that.
The clothing very reminiscent of the Wicker Man.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just it's like old-ish clothing that people made themselves.
Tunics,
yeah. Right, yeah. So yeah, anyway, they get introduced, and like everybody's, super nice, and it seems to be a lot of drugs and, and stuff like that. They meet other people that have, come from other places. Like they have a couple that came from London. There's a couple other people that are, you can see them in their regular clothes, like they're obviously been brought in from outside, to come celebrate their thing. And and it starts out as they're just kind of feasting and happy, kind of go lucky stuff. They have like a speech in Swedish, but she makes sure to repeat everything in English to like make sure that everybody feels welcome and that kind of stuff. And then they essentially go, okay, tomorrow's when the actual stuff starts. Go get some rest, and then we'll start in the morning. And they basically go all sleep in this like big barn that just has like, I don't know, 100 beds in it. I don't know. There's a lot of beds in it.
Oh yeah.
And it's just everybody just sleeps in this big like commune. So in the morning they basically have like this little feast where like these two old people are kind of like the head feast people. They're like obviously the guests of honor. They have this long kind of parade procession to this big high rock cliff. And everybody's standing there looking up at the cliff. And these people walk all the way to the top, say a bunch of, I guess prayer level type stuff, and then jump off.
Yes.
To their death. The lady jumps first, and she just lands on a big rock and just dies immediately. But, it's graphic, and you do see that head, like, squish. And everybody's like, whoa, what is going on? But, everybody in the group that we've been introduced to is just kind of, like, in shock. Like, they don't really say anything or do anything. They're just like, what is going on? So we're like, the two English, the couple, is, like, freaking out.
Yes.
They're like screaming and yelling, like, what, you can't do this. Like, why are you making us watch this? How come nobody's doing anything? How come everybody's just watching this happen and nobody's helping? And then the old man goes up there, and then the old man jumps off, but he doesn't do it right, and
No,
he lands on his legs. So his legs like shatter, and he's still alive. And so they go over to him with like this big hammer, and then like it looks like every member of his family gets like one whack on his head. Because like there's like 4 people that hit him in the head when he's obviously very dead after the first couple, but they still go through the process of. It looks like everybody in like his family gets to hit him once or something. Anyway,
yeah.
So yeah, they're all kind of like in shock, and that the couple is like freaking out, and they're like, basically saying that they're going to go report them to the authorities, whatever. And so like the lady who was kind of like the head kind of the person who gave the speech the day before, goes to talk to him like, this is part of our culture. Basically when somebody gets too old in our culture, in order for our society to move forward, so they don't have people waiting on them. We don't have, whatever. We don't have to deal with the elderly. They want to do things for themselves. If they can't do things for themselves anymore, they sacrifice themselves for the good of the community.
Right. They said if you make the 72, you're dead. You're
right.
done.
They don't get an actual age until later. But at this point in time, they're basically saying like, when you get old, like this is what they do. This is, they voluntarily do this to keep us moving forward, to keep us strong. And
right.
the London couple are not convinced at all. No. So they go back to town and they're like, we are leaving. We are going like right now. And they're like, okay, you can leave tomorrow morning. And so everybody else is just kind of like, wow, I don't know what happened. But anyway, so the boyfriend, Christian, okay, I just remembered his name. His name was Christian. And Chidi, because Chidi is there he's doing his like doctoral thesis on like European pagan cultures or something.
Right.
That this obviously falls under. And so the boyfriend, Christian, after seeing this, decides that he is going to do his thesis specifically on these people. And so, of course, him and Chidi kind of butt heads there because he's like, you just copied off. Like, I've been writing my thesis for months. And he's like, well, yeah, but, you're not doing it on only this. You're going to, like, England and Germany after this, to, like, write about stuff there, too. But he's like, yeah, but he's like, obviously after what we just saw, you knew I was going to focus on this, right? Which he probably did, but whatever. But he went above his head and talked to the elders before him. So Chidi basically has to like agree to work with him, or else he doesn't get to work with it at all.
Right.
And so they kind of begrudgingly agree. So anyway, the next day in the morning, the Connie, I remember her name. I don't remember the guy's name.
Archie. Simon.
Archie was his real name. Anyway,
yes.
So Simon, Connie gets up and she's like, "Oh yeah, we're ready to go to town." They're like, "Oh yeah, Simon went into town already." She's like, "What do you mean he wouldn't do that?" He's like, "Well, the truck only holds 2, and we have to be the driver." So and then you didn't want to waste any time, so he drove up there, and then they're going to come back and pick you up, and then they're going to go out and meet up. And she's like, obviously very upset, like he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. So like they kind of witness this, like Florence P witnesses this, and she's like, goes to tell everybody else, like, hey, isn't that kind of weird? And they're all like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Like, they don't really seem to care. But then very shortly after that, Connie also just disappears. So they assume that they just left, right? So we get into where we see Christian and Chidi are now like kind of interviewing the elders. They get to see like their holy book, and they're kind of like their church and their stuff like that. And they realize that the guy who writes their scripture is like someone that is purposely inbred so that their mind is unclouded by logic.
Right.
And then he like paints pictures, and then they like interpret the pictures to be their scripture. And there's like hundreds of these books all over the wall. And so Chidi wants to take pictures of the book, and they're like, absolutely not. This is our holy text. You can't take pictures of this. He's like, okay, all right, fine. And the other guy is talking to one of the other kind of elder guys, and he specifically says, "No, we don't have incest," which is odd. Like they're getting two completely different stories. Like I don't know if they purposely did that to show that they're not really giving them the truth, or what. I guess I don't know. So essentially, so that night, somebody goes. Well, that's what they tell everybody. But anyway, so Chidi goes into. Or no, but the Mark thing happens.
Mark happens first. Yes.
Yeah. So they're having like a whatever. They're like all hanging out and doing drugs and drinking. They're like constantly drinking. Like there seems to be beer just freely available all the time. So Mark decides that I gotta go take a piss. So he goes to take a piss and he ends up pissing on their like sacred ancestor tree. And this is like it's a dead tree, but they like apparently like bury the ashes of their dead underneath it. And they do show them earlier showing that, the two people that killed themselves, they burn them and then they put their ashes on this tree. So he goes and pisses on the sacred tree. And so they're very, very, very upset.
Yeah.
And there's like this one guy in particular that's like staring him down like all through that day.
I think he's going to kill me.
Right. And so then that, Mark kind of disappears. They don't know where he went. They think he went off after the one girl that was kind of like, giving him the eye,
Yeah.
So he, she like asks him, oh, you want to come with me for a second? And he's like, okay. So he leaves. And so, through the rest of the day, they're like, oh, I guess he's just, out in the woods, messing with the girl or whatever. So later on, Chidi breaks into, that night, Chidi wakes up in the middle of the night and he goes to sneak into the church and he's going to the sacred books and he's taking pictures of it. Somebody else comes in the church and it's Mark. He's like, oh, Mark, you're not supposed to be in here. Like, what are you doing? Where have you been? And then the closer he gets, he realizes that it's somebody has skinned Mark and taken off his face and his clothes and is wearing it. Like, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose to fool him or what the hell they were doing, but whatever. So we're very obviously shown that Mark has already been killed.
Yeah.
And then now Chidi is also gone.
Yep.
So at this point, it's just Florence Pugh and her boyfriend. And the boyfriend is like, kind of seems to be increasingly just kind of distant from her. He's like very much more concerned with, finding out all the little secrets about this town than he is about talking to her. So he like has, I think this is the hair pie.
It is the hair pie, yes.
Yeah, so they have this dinner. There is like a mural earlier in the thing where it shows like this process of like getting someone to fall in love with you. It shows like these goofy pictures of a woman like cutting pubic hair and putting it in food, and then also like menstruating into a like cup. And then if you get the person to eat this food and drink that, mixture, they will fall in love with you.
Also, wasn't it something put under their pillow?
Yeah. So Chidi had found the, whatever piece of wood or horn with the rune on it underneath Christian's bed. And then when Christian goes to eat food, like these little pies or whatever, and like he takes a bite out of it and there's like obviously a pubic hair in the food. And his drink is very obviously redder than everyone else's drink. Like everyone else has like orange juice and his looks like grapefruit juice.
Yes.
So it's like, very obvious that it's in there. So he bites the pie and he drinks the drink. So whatever. So apparently love spell now complete. So at this point, they have like the actual May Queen, thing where they basically get the girls high on some kind of weird hallucinogenic tea. Probably mushroom tea. I don't know what it is, but it's some kind of hallucinogenic tea. And then they all just like start dancing. Basically, it's like whoever is the last person left standing is now the May Queen.
Right.
So she's like, does all the dancing, and Florence Pugh ends up winning and becomes the new May Queen. And again, Christian is like barely involved in this. He like watches it for like a minute and then leaves. Like he's, again, increasingly distant as time goes on. So, as part of her job as May Queen, they have like the feast, and then they have like she has to go like bless the cows and the crops and all that kind of stuff. And while she's doing all of that, basically they drag Christian into this church, which is like, so the girl that cast the spell on him is like, laying on the ground, like obviously, trying to seduce him. And there's a whole bunch of naked old ladies in there, like singing and kind of like swaying back and forth. So he's kind of like, I guess, hypnotized.
I would say drugged out of his gourd.
I don't know about that. I don't think he was even that high. I mean, he was given that smoke stuff for virility, but I don't think he was like drugged. I think it was just the love potion.
Sure.
Anyway, so whatever. He gets seduced. He goes in there and he starts, making sweet love to this lady that gave him the hair pie. And the old ladies are like weirdly like, I don't know, touching on him and like getting all involved and like, holding their hands. It's a bizarre, weird scene. And anyway, so Florence Pugh is like, oh, I wonder what Christian's doing. And they're all like, oh, you probably don't want to go in there. She's like, right. No, I really do. And so she goes in there and she opens the door and she sees what's happening. And of course she like breaks down again, starts sobbing, and not quite as bad as it was in the beginning. But, at this point it's like she's in this Sweden, like, around a bunch of people that she really doesn't know, and her boyfriend, and then her boyfriend has now betrayed her. So now she feels alone again. But once she feels alone, like all the other women that are there, like sob along with her and like, are like genuinely trying to empathize with her. So essentially afterwards, Christian like gets upset and just kind of like leaves and runs like after he realizes what happens, and he's running around naked.
Yep.
Around like, and he's basically like taking a tour of all the places they told him not to go into. So he goes, into this one place and he finds Simon hung up from the ceiling of like a livestock pen, blood eagled. And this is the first time I've what?
And alive still.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The first time I've ever heard of a blood eagle and the person lived.
Yes.
So we're talking full on, like, backs cut open, lungs are pulled out of the back and spread across their back like wings, and he's still breathing while being suspended from the ceiling.
Yes. And
his eyes have been cut out and replaced with flowers. So he's like, okay, yeah, this is bad. So he runs out of there, and then he finds like Cheety's leg like sticking out of a garden. And he finds Mark's like skinned weird scarecrow body. Right. And then gets, drugged again. He gets like some dust blown in his face and he gets knocked out. But anyway, and then when he wakes up, he's now like totally paralyzed, like in a wheelchair. And Florence Pugh is now the May Queen, like covered in flowers. Like she's like a mountain of flowers.
Yeah,
she's like a big mound of flowers with a head sticking out, with a crown out. So they basically tell her, like, this is a sacrifice that has to be, a certain amount of people, whatever. So we have 2 of our people that already jumped to their deaths that sacrificed, right? We have 4 of the new people that, they say sacrificed themselves, but really they killed, right? So that's Simon, Connie, Mark, and Cheety. And they're saying, like, there's going to be 2 more that kill themselves, and there's, 2 people that have already volunteered. So then there's 4, and then there's 1 more. That has to be 9 sacrifices. And there's 1 more, and the May Queen gets to pick it, So there has to be, like, whatever the outsiders, so that's Christian is the last outsider besides her. And then, so they do, like, this bingo thing, like, literally, they have, like, this spinning bingo ball. And they pull out a name, and it's, like, Thornborn, whatever, like, some random Scandinavian dude comes walking up, and she has to choose between. And we don't see who she chooses at that time, but then we see Christian being stuffed inside of a bear.
Yes.
Like a live bear. They empty out the inside of the bear, and then they stuff Christian in the bear. Anyway, so they put him in this big, like, triangle kind of temple, which is basically just filled with hay and stuff that'll burn. So they put all the dead bodies in there. So all the 4 outsiders, him still alive in the bear suit, the 2 old people, I guess are already dead, but they like made like these weird, I don't know, scarecrows out of their heads, right?
Yeah.
And then the 2 other dudes that sacrificed themselves are still alive in there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like they're just sitting there. They do give him like some weird drug, but it apparently doesn't work because they still scream. And then they close up the doors and they catch it on fire, and then they get kind of a slow burn, literally, of everything catching on fire, the alive people screaming and burning, and then we see Christian screaming and burning, and then we see Florence Pugh watching everything burn and then slowly go from like sadness to happiness. And then that's the end.
Yeah. I was wrong. This came out in 2019, so a year after. But what was your first thought upon seeing this?
My first thought is like it's extremely rare because it's a horror movie that's almost all set during the day.
Correct.
Like I think there's like
Chidi's death scene was at night.
Right.
That's about it.
Yeah, Chidi's death scene, and then like the beginning scene of like her, finding out about her dead family is at night.
Right.
Like everything else in Sweden, the only scene is when Chidi goes to the church. That's the only scene that's at night. Everything else is during. But it's just very odd to have a horror movie with that light and that bright of a color palette, with like lots of whites and bright colors and like greenery and everything. Is just a very odd color palette for a horror movie. Usually, when we're talking atmosphere in horror movies, it's very black, very dark. On purpose, but this is very, very bright and very whimsical, which is odd.
Yes. For me, like I said, this is as you're right. This is Ari Aster's second one. I go, okay, this guy is doing great things. He's able to pull off a horror movie in daylight, as you said, just so rare. Very reminiscent of the Wicker Man, the original Wicker Man. Kind of like that outsider going into a society and not understanding their cultures just to be a sacrifice. It's I don't think there's anything really supernatural about this movie. And as you point out, just he hits you hard right out of the gate this time too.
Yeah, like I said, the opening scene of the movie is like a brutal scene.
Yeah, he's pretty brutal the entire way through. I've seen this a handful of times as well, and it's I've watched a lot of movies saying, oh, you can see stuff in the background. And people kind of start looking for stuff in the background with his movies, just like, Mike Flanagan's TV shows where you have to look for, all the 172 ghosts you may have missed in the background. Supposedly, I've only seen it a couple places, but you can see, I guess her parents or her sister hooked up with the hoses throughout the movies somewhere.
I mean, she does flash back to him a couple of times, but if you're talking like in the background, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, supposedly when she's looking out into the forest, they're there. I don't see it as where everyone says it's supposed to be, but I'm also not looking that hard in the background all times either. But no, I thought this was a great second movie for Ari Aster. Now I just go, okay, this is definitely he cemented himself into elevated horror at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could call it elevated horror. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what elevated horror means. I know that's the joke that we got from Scream. I don't know what it means. But
yes.
Yeah, I would say this is more like I would call it like art house horror. This is it's horror for sure, but it is done in a very, very artistic and deliberate way.
Right, and that's kind of not like Argento was very artsy with art house with his stuff too. Very
Right.
vibrant colors, setting the scenes. And I think Ari Aster did a great job, not having, have to have that red everywhere, but atmospherically, visually stunning as well.
Right.
Why don't you go into your highlights?
Highlights. Florence Pugh.
Yep.
I mean, she's just a delight. She's been great in everything I have seen her in. She's, I mean, again, just fantastic. I have yet to see a bad performance out of her. I mean, there are things I have not seen that she is in. Maybe they're there, but I've seen her in quite a few things, and she's been great in everything. She's fantastic. I mean, that murder suicide scene is rough. I mean, again, just the effects alone on that scene, and just like the details around it and everything it's just like it slaps you immediately, right? You get this big slap, you're like, whoa, and then it's a very slow burn after.
Yeah.
But you get that initial slap to put you in the right spot so that slow burn starts in the right way. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting scene, done very, very well. I mean, just the Swedish culture itself. I mean, that whole idea of like, just kind of an old pagan, midsummer, kind of festival, done in the old school way. It is interesting. I know it's been done before, but I thought they did a good job with it. It's interesting to see.
Right.
And just the style and how it was shot. Again, like I say, it's like mixing art and horror together here, and it really is. I mean, just the way that things are shot, the way things are, the angles, the deliberate way that the scenes are put together. Just fantastic job.
Oh, yeah. I any other highlights?
No. What about you?
Okay. No, I completely agree. It's like I said, it's like an Argento movie, but with like that the art style is what you consider like the artsy, like, we recently saw a movie and we're supposed to we saw a preview and it's like, these big grandiose shots are very art house style. We're just like, are we supposed to know who this person is, this director or writer? That type of like independent film art house movies, but with that just horror element makes it so unsettling and great. Like I said, it being in essentially daylight and being able to pull it off was a big highlight for me, because as we said multiple times about this, everything's in the dark. You try to hide the violence in the darkness. You don't get to really see the full effect of it. There's speculation whether Blood Eagle actually existed or not. I think that it only appeared like once or twice in all of Norse mythology, to the point where we don't know if it actually happened or not.
Well, yeah, the consensus is that it did not.
Right.
It was basically like the one time they find it in like old writings was like they were talking about like what they would do to this like traitor person if they found him.
Right.
There's no evidence that they actually did it.
Right. Just like how the Iron Maiden was never actually a torture device. It was just something made up.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of those torture devices are. But again, I mean, yeah. So, of course, when you're ever going to have anything Viking related, you're going to have the Blood Eagle. Like, I mean, I think every Viking show, Viking movie always does it.
Right. Right.
But again, it's something brutal and it's unique to them. So.
And this may be the first thing I saw Florence Pugh in, if I'm not mistaken. But no, she definitely felt the primal screams felt like legit from her.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, fantastic job. I mean, she like went into like full on like ugly cry, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
like the weird, the weird squeals and coughs and like weird, all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I think I want to say the first thing I saw her in was the Outlaw King. Did you ever see that?
No.
I think Chris Pine is in it. It was pretty good. That's the first thing I remember seeing her in.
What about low points for you? I imagine we have the same low point, at least for one of them.
I mean, basically, it's like the people in her life just suck.
Well, yeah.
Right? I mean, like, she doesn't really have any of her own friends. I mean, they show her talking on the phone to one of her friends, like, in the beginning, but we don't get to see her, like, around her friends. Like, her boyfriend sucks. I mean, he's just an ass. I mean, the guy just, again, you know, what he's talking about, you know, oh, I want to break up with her in the beginning, but he can't do it because he's, you know, scared or weak or whatever. And it just, he just never upgrades from that. He's always just forever in that, like, I'm a shitty person kind of mold. And all his friends are just kind of basically the same. They're all just like shit people.
They're bros.
Yeah, right. Well, the only one that seems like he's decent is Pella. And I guess ultimately to her, he is a good person, but not necessarily to everybody else.
No, he purposely brought his friends there to get killed. I mean, let's face it.
That was their purpose for sure. But they all kind of suck. Like Danny really felt like the only person that had like a whole personality out of that group. Everybody else was just kind of like so selfish that they just like couldn't even think of other people.
Right.
Like all of them were like that.
Yeah.
And she was like the only one concerned about other people. Another thing I will say, Christian. Now, throughout the entire movie, I can describe him as stomach problems. Right? He's constantly acting like he's got a real bad stomach ache and he's holding in diarrhea. Like the whole time. Like, again, you see him, he's sitting there with like his hand in front of his mouth like he's about to puke. Like almost every scene he's in, he's doing that. Even when he's not doing that, you look at his face, you're like, that guy is going to shit himself. Like, he looks like he's like, that's his like permanent face. I don't know if he's doing it for this movie because like it sells it as being a shit person. Like that is right. Like, okay, like, yeah, I believe that guy sucks because just the way he's acting like he's a fucking weirdo. But yeah, every scene he's in, he just looks like he's about to shit himself. Like it looks like he's got severe stomach issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, that and the blood eagle was was pretty horrific.
For me, the bloody grapefruit juice and the hair pie.
Well, obviously, yeah, but
right.
Like, no thanks.
Right. And as much as as Florence Pugh did a great job, the old women, while Christian's getting on with his hair pie girl, was just disturbing. I know that was the point.
Well, they're sharing the experience of being a woman with this girl who's I guess like a virgin, right?
Right.
But she's like excited to like have a baby to like, continue the whatever, the line or whatever it is. And they're there with her. They're like, he's just there as, he's a consequence, right? Like they need him for a purpose and then they don't care about him.
Correct.
And they're just basically trying to get it over with. That's why the old lady's like, pumping on his ass. Like, come on, let's go. Like, get this shit moving.
Yeah. And that's why I'm like, he has to be, something's not right mentally for him to be in the full on cognitive state. Like, I don't care. You leave.
Again, he had his hair pie hypnotized.
I guess.
Whatever. I guess that would be the supernatural element in this movie, was he got hypnotized.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they did give him that smoke stuff ahead of time, but he was ready to go even before that, I think.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, that's my low point. So, how many primeval screams out of 10 do you give this movie?
It's tough.
Do you like it? Do you like it more than Hereditary?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8.75. 8.75 primal screams out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is I obviously I like Hereditary. I think this is a great movie as well, and I think I like it slightly more. So I will go 9.25 Primal Screams out of 10. All right, so
Okay,
that brings
now, yeah, Beau is Afraid. Just came out this year, not too long ago. I mean, it was a couple of months ago, I
a
think,
couple months ago, but for streaming, it just came out. So yes,
right? Okay. But yeah, so the recap on this one, we're gonna have to like just kind of skim over it because there is way too much going on here to like try to explain everything. And in order for you to understand half the stuff that's going on, like you'd have to whatever.
you have
There's
to
a
see
lot
it.
of there's a lot of nuance to it. You have to see it. We're gonna go over the main scenes here. We're gonna tell you the major events that happen in the scene, and we're just gonna kind of omit a lot of it. And we'll just have to talk about the things we liked at the end,
Right.
because there's too much happening.
As Sam and I were discussing earlier before recording, is if anyone that's listening knows the movie Big Fish, that these are stories that may have taken place, but these are very exaggerated, elaborated, fictitious stuff. Is I think the best way to describe this movie as a whole. That there may be some truth to the elements of these stories, but they're highly exaggerated. You know, instead of catching that 6-inch fish, you call it a 3-foot fish. Well, in this case, the 3-foot fish also has, you know, homeless people running around everywhere and
Right.
crime-ridden areas, and just
Right. So yeah, we'll say okay, the first scene takes place in New York. Now,
there.
if you would
Think 80s Times Square.
well, okay, it's like this. If you think all the bad things that you've heard about the city, right?
Yeah.
All like, dead bodies everywhere, gang shootings, like, just all the horrible, horrible stuff, right? All of these little things that you've heard are so bad, right? If you measure them on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 10 being the worst.
Yes.
This movie and this section of New York is at 26.
Oh, absolutely.
It is like so far off the scale, so ridiculous. Like there's literally, as he's walking down the street, there is like just this crazy shit happening behind him the entire fucking time. Like we're talking kids reloading AK-47s, like people trying to cut off their own hands. Like a guy that's like literally just keeps doing the same dance move like for days at a time. I mean, people fighting in the streets, dead bodies laying in the middle of streets, and
For
no one
days.
doing anything about that. I mean, it's like just insane stuff.
Yes.
Again, we're just gonna kind of over arc here. So, first scene, basically, yeah, he's living in the city. He goes to his therapist, and he's basically mentions to his therapist that he's going to meet his mother. His therapist gives him a new medicine for anxiety.
Must drink with water.
And he must drink with water. Absolutely must drink with water. So,
yes.
He goes home. He's basically trying to get in for the night. He has to like start running down the street when he's still out of like visual range of his apartment, so that he can run in his front door and then slam it closed before any of the other people try breaking
in particular, the heavily tattooed man was
like literally his eyes are tattooed. Like every part of him is tattooed. Anyway, yeah, like again, everything is way off the chart. Between 1 and 10, we're in the 20. So he gets in there, he takes his pill and he realizes he doesn't have any water. The water is not working in his apartment. He doesn't have any water, so he has to go across the street to get water. And it's like, this horrible anxiety-ridden thing. Finally gets over there, and as he's like, he has to put a phone book in the door to hold it open. And as he's over there, like, digging through his wallet for change to buy this bottle of water, every one of those crazy people that was out on the street then breaks into his apartment.
Like 3-block radius, everyone's in his
we're
apartment.
talking, there's like 50 people in his apartment.
Right.
So he can't get back in, obviously. So he just goes on this balcony and just like watches them do their insane shit in his house while he waits. He eventually falls asleep, wakes up in the morning, goes into his house. It's completely trashed. I guess, well, there was a scene earlier, but whatever. He missed his flight to go meet his mother.
Right.
So now he needs to go get his mother. So he tries to get another flight. He can't get another flight. He's trying to figure out what he can do. So he decides to go take a bath. There is a guy somehow like Spider-Man up in the ceiling, like watching him. And
I don't know if he's watching him or he's just there from the party and hiding.
I don't know whatever the hell is going on. So he ends up like rolling around in the bathtub, wrestling this guy after he falls down and gets bitten by a brown recluse spider.
Yeah, so naked Joaquin Phoenix and this guy are rolling around the tub for about 5-10 minutes.
Right. Longer than it should have been. So he runs out. The front door has been broken open. He runs out into the street, and he gets hit by a van.
Yes.
And then he gets kind of knocked out. And then that's the end of this scene.
Yes. Too much crazy shit.
Right.
You need to watch
way more than that happens. You'll need to watch it to understand more. Second scene, he wakes up in like a super suburban home in like the suburbs, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm talking like ultra nuclear, like middle class, like ultra generic family. Okay. So there's mom and dad and then like a girl. And he's in the girls' room is like your typical like, ultra teenage girl room with like all the posters and pink and everything all over the wall. Anyway, so we find out that he got hit by their van because they were down there like giving out soup to people or something. So they got hit by their van. The guy was the dad is a surgeon, so he, patched him up, and he found out that he also got stabbed by the birthday boy stab man, which is we saw like a news story about him, which is this naked old guy that just runs around stabbing people. So he stabbed him in the side and he stabbed him in the hand. So he wakes up and he gets, he's all stitched up on his side. He's, his hand is all bandaged up. Anyway, so they feel bad for him. So they're trying to like nurse him back to health, and he's basically saying, I have to go back to my mother's place because, when the last time I called, like the UPS guy answered and said that he found her dead in her house.
Well, maybe it's her because there's not a head. Because
right, yeah, there's no head, but he doesn't know, but he's assuming that she's dead. So he's like, was that a dream? Like, whatever. And so he basically figures out, he calls like the family lawyer, and no, it's not a dream. It actually happened. His mom is dead, and he has to get home. So he has to get there as soon as possible because they can't bury her until he gets there.
Because in her will, she cannot be buried without him there.
Right. So it's basically in the house is the mom and dad and the girl. And then they had a son. The son died in the army. And they also have a guy living in like a mobile home on their property who was like friends with their son that was in the same unit as him when they got attacked and killed. He was the only survivor of the whole unit. And he's like, again, if you take PTSD on a scale of 1 to 10, this guy's like a 35.
And he looks like Bert Kreischer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He looks like, if Bert Kreischer and Bautista had a baby, that's what he looked. He's like this giant dude, and he's just like constantly angry and screaming and freaking out. I mean, it's nuts. And they keep having to like chase him down and drug him at the same time. They're like, he's fine. He's just, he's having a hard time. Like, he's insane.
Well, because Dr. Raj.
Right. Yeah. So, basically like, okay, we'll take you, to go there tomorrow. Right. It's like, okay. So then tomorrow comes around and, oh, sorry, I got called in for an emergency surgery. And, oh, all my other surgeries that I had to push off that I was going to drive you. Now I have to do those too. So we'll do it tomorrow. And he's like, is that okay? And he's like, I guess fine. We'll do it tomorrow.
Right.
And then that night, again, it's weird because the mom is like trying to give him hints that like something else is going on in the house.
Don't implicate yourself anymore.
Yeah. Like she's sending him like napkin notes that says stop incriminating yourself. Yeah. Like she shows him like the TV and like he changes the channel and like you can see there's like CCTV throughout the entire house. Yeah. We never get any answers to that. But the daughter is like angry and happy at the same time that she's in her room. Like she's mad that he's in her room, but whenever he tries to sleep on the couch, she gets like violent and angry about it. Anyway, so she's like having a freak out moment, finally goes into the brother's room that no one is allowed to go into. And she decides that she's going to repaint the whole room. So she paints Beau's name on the wall and then is trying to get Beau to drink paint with her to kill themselves, whatever. I've never heard of drinking paint to kill yourself. I mean, that's a horrible way to go.
Clearly it works, though.
Yeah. So he refuses, and then she drinks paint and dies. And then the mom comes in, sees this, and immediately blames him, and then sics Jeeves on him. Jeeves is the PTSD guy. Yeah, like, again, 6 Jeeves on him, so he has to run away. Okay? Now, that's end of scene 2.
Well, he hits his head on a tree branch.
Oh, sorry.
End of season.
Yeah, yes. He hits his head on the tree branch as he's running away. End of scene 2.
Yes.
Okay, scene 3, he wakes up in the woods, and he's lost and wandering around, and he finds this pregnant lady, and he asks for help, and she's like, oh, yeah, sure. She leads him deeper into the woods to a group, like a theater troupe of orphans, of all ages, not just children, that decide they just like travel around the country and they put on random plays in the middle of forests for basically themselves because no one else knows that these shows exist. So they're basically like, oh, you want to be part of it and watch the show? He's like, sure. So he sits down, starts watching the show, and then basically he becomes his own play. Like, he starts acting the play out in himself. And it's like this long play about how he finds this village to live in. He finds a wife. He has children. Then there's a big flood. He gets, pushed to another country. He can't find his family. Spends decades trying to find his family. Finally meets up with his sons. And then we hear the whole story about how, I've never had sex before, even though I'm 40 years old. And then they're like, well, how did you have us then? And then he just kind of snaps out of it. And then we see that he's back at.
Right. He lived 40 years out in his head.
Right. Yeah. And then he snaps out of it.
And it would say very artsy.
Oh, yeah. No, yes. It's animated. It's very animated. Like, yes. I mean, literally animated.
Even the water.
Yes.
That he's standing down and drinking from is animated.
Right.
Yes.
So he snaps back and he's now back in the audience. And the audience gets attacked by Jeeves.
Yes.
So there's a guy who is like claiming to know his dad because his dad was supposedly dead and died in the act of conceiving him.
Yes, he climaxed and then died.
Right. Yes. And the mom always told him that's also how he would die. So he should never have sex. And that's why he never has.
Right.
But again, and that's why they were like, well, how'd you have us? And that's what snapped him. So, so that guy, this old guy is like, oh yeah, I knew your dad. And then he kind of implies that he was his dad, kind of.
He implies he's his dad, and then, boom.
Yeah, and then a big explosion happens because Jeeves hits the party and just starts shooting everyone. And
right.
Bombs are going off and shooting, and then so Beau starts running again. And then Jeeves has this like remote control thing because they put like an ankle monitor on him when he was at this suburban house. He hits like the incapacitate button on his phone after he trips and falls and shoots himself like, I don't know, 100 times through his own chest. And then he hits the incapacitate button and the ankle bracelet like explodes and Beau like passes out.
Yes.
End of that scene.
Yes.
And then the next scene is, it starts out in that same place, but he very quickly hitchhikes and he finally gets back to his home or his mom's home. He gets there and he apparently just missed the funeral. So he goes in there and the body is still in the casket with no head.
Right. Open casket.
Yeah, open casket with no head. A lady with no head. So he's like just kind of wandering through the house and like looking over her things. And, his mom was like a very rich and very like important lady.
CEO.
Yeah, owned her own company, built herself up by the bootstraps, blah, blah, blah kind of nonsense, right? As we saw in some of the flashbacks that she is like a very severe woman, I guess you could say, like a very, exacting woman, like things have to be done kind of her way. And she expects things to be returned to her in a certain way.
It's very emotional and psychologically abusive.
Yes, very much so.
Yes.
So we had one kind of flashback where we see like they're on a cruise and Beau is like what, maybe, I don't know, 12, 13, somewhere around there.
Let's say 13.
Yeah. And he has this crush on this girl named Elaine. They have a very brief, I guess romance you could call it, where they kiss like twice.
Right.
And then she gets dragged away, but she gives him a picture of her and writes on there like, "Please wait for me. Like, I'll love you forever." Whatever.
Right.
So he has waited for her forever, but he's never seen her again after that point. Anyway.
Right.
So now he's in the house. He goes through, looks over everything. He lays down to take a nap. He wakes up to somebody going, "Hello, is anybody here?" He goes out there and it's Elaine. And she's like, "Oh, I thought it was at 8 p.m. at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And so he's like, "Okay, that's great." So they basically he says, "You're Elaine." And he says, "I'm Beau," and then they remember who they are, and immediately decide that they're gonna bone.
Yep,
literally immediately. So they run upstairs, and then they're getting it on, and Beau is very afraid that he is going to die as soon as he climaxes, because this is what's been pumped into his head his whole life, that don't ever have sex because once you do, you'll die.
Right.
So, she's just very into the whole, kind of casual sex encounter thing, right? And, he's just, enjoying himself, and then he climaxes and finishes, and then he's still alive. And he was like, "Oh man, I really thought I was going to die." And she's like, "Oh, whatever, hold on, now it's my turn, let me finish," right? So they're going for a little while, and then, I guess maybe climaxes again. I don't know. He's very happy and excited, and he's like talking. Like, "Wow, this is so great. I can't believe it." And then he looks up, and then now she's dead.
Yes.
Like she had, it looks like an aneurysm because her eyes all red or whatever.
Yep.
And he's like, so he throws her off. She's like immediately rigor mortis.
Immediately.
Yeah, immediately. Within 5 seconds, she's just completely frozen in place. And anyways, it throws her off the bed. He rolls off to the other side, and now he's kind of trying to decide what to do. And then his mother comes walking in. So she wasn't dead at all. She faked her own death. But Beau knew this because the body in the casket he knew was his home, caretaker growing up.
Well, because she had the birthmark on her hand.
Right. She had a very distinctive birthmark on her hand, and they didn't bother covering it.
Right.
In the thing. So they basically find out that, he's like, "Why would you do that to her?" And she's like, "Oh, she volunteered."
Right.
We kind of just see
family never has to work again.
Right. Yeah. We see what kind of person she is that, yeah. "Oh, yeah, I killed her because she volunteered, but I gave her family a bunch of money, so it's okay."
Right.
And basically get down to mom is trying to super guilt trip him into, "I'm doing all this stuff for you and you've done nothing back for me. I only asked you to come visit. You couldn't even do that. So I had to pretend to kill myself or even get you to show up here. And even then you came here late.
You gave my gift to someone else."
Yeah, right. Yeah, just super guilt trip kind of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, there's a bizarre scene where he had a dream to where he had a twin that fought with mom, and then mom got mad at him, put him up in the attic, and they never talked about him again. And she
because
was like,
the twin wanted to know what actually happened to their dad.
right, yeah.
His brother was the brave one. He was the afraid one.
Right. So she's like, "Oh, well, come in the attic. Go look up there." So she goes up there, and she's like, "Yeah, it wasn't a dream. It was a memory." And then now he's up in the attic, and he sees his twin brother, who's looks like a guy that's been on a desert island for 40 years,
right?
The long scraggly beard or whatever. And then he also sees his dad, who is a giant penis monster.
Yes.
Who can talk because he's like, "Oh, my beautiful boy." It's bizarre, but literally just a huge just dick and balls just undulating around as a monster person. And this moment, Jeeves finally is alive. Apparently, he didn't die from shooting himself 100 times. He jumps through the window, fights the penis monster, shoots the penis monster 20 times. The penis monster just stabs him in the head with his
he gets the brain bugged.
Right.
From Starship Troopers.
Right. Yeah, he's got praying mantis arms as a penis monster and stabs him in the head and kills And so then he goes back downstairs, has another fight with his mother, same kind of guilt trip kind of stuff. And he like chokes her, right? He just like finally snaps and chokes her.
Yes.
And she, he eventually lets go, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. And she like never like recovers, and just falls into a glass coffee table, and for all intents and purposes, looks like she's dead.
Yeah.
So he freaks out. He runs to like a boat, like it's like a little rowboat, but it has an outboard motor on it.
Yeah.
And so he jumps in it, and he's like, motoring through the lake, and all of a sudden he goes through this like tunnel, and then he ends up in this like giant arena, and all the lights come up, and it's like a giant arena, and on one side is like his mom and his mom's lawyer, and then on the other side is, I guess, supposed to be his defense team.
Yeah.
But they don't have a microphone, and you can barely hear what they say, and then they end up getting murdered halfway through the trial. So basically, the mom is just bringing up all this, goofy, ultimately kind of little stuff, right?
Oh,
and
you got me the same present twice.
Yeah, you gave me the same gift
2
years in a row, and it was like, a Bette Midler CD, and she got the same CD 2 years in a row. And that was this horrible thing to her.
Right.
The second thing was like, he let a bunch of his friends come over and then like steal his mom's underwear out of the laundry basket.
Right.
Again, just in the grand scheme of like all the things we've seen so far in this movie, these are like, this is nothing.
Right.
And so then they show like, oh, well, look, when Raj was like, saying that, oh, I have all these surgeries and stuff to do. Is it okay if we go tomorrow? You didn't force him to say we should go tonight. You let him say we can go tomorrow. Like, that's a bad thing. Like, really? That's that bad? And for all the other things, like, if you obviously watching him and have video footage of this, did you see the rest of the shit he went through to get here?
Right. Your keys and your luggage weren't really stolen. Right. But they were.
Which they were. Again, it's bizarre. It's like, even though she has, like, all of this footage and surveillance on him, like, she still picks and chooses what she wants to see and believe. Again, It's just like this intense, super guilt trip. And then, Beau tries to like defend himself and eventually just kind of, just resigns himself to be like, yeah, whatever. I guess I'm guilty. That's fine. And then the outboard motor explodes and the boat flips over. Violently flips over. And we see him like struggling to like, I guess, come out from underneath the boat and then slowly stop. And then that's it. That's the end.
Right, because he was glued to the boat.
Well, yeah, whatever. He was trapped under it. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then ultimately it looks like he dies, and then that's it.
Yep. Lots of stuff in there, though.
Oh, yeah. I went over like not even a tenth of what actually happens in the movie.
Lots and lots of crazy shit. But why don't you go into your first thought upon seeing this?
First thoughts is like, I was just trying to figure out what this is. Is this supposed to be like a mentally disturbed person version of like what really happened?
Right.
Or is this supposed to be like metaphors for situations that they were actually in? You know what I mean? Like ultra exaggerated, just metaphors of things. Like obviously the city is not that crazy, but is this just, they make it that crazy so you can see that's kind of how they felt about it at the time. That it was a crazy time that they lived there. Who knows? Ultimately, you don't know. But that's what I was thinking of the whole time I was watching it. I was like, what is this? What is this supposed to mean? Like, in what state of mind are we supposed to be in, or are we supposed to think that they are in to make this believable? And ultimately, you really can't. Because it's you try to be like, okay, well, if it's this one thing, and then you see, oh, well, no, it intersects with this other thing. That can't be possible. Whatever. It's all over the place. Again, we were talking about it earlier, and I talked about it. It's kind of like how David Lynch.
Yes.
Like a David Lynch movie, like you can try to make sense out of it, but you really ultimately can't, because you're never going to get a real answer as to what the hell is going on. It's just ultimately up to you. What do you think is going on? And that's kind of like where I got to at the end of this.
Yeah.
What about you?
First off, 3-hour movie. stupid long.
It is very
stupid long. There's multiple points. I'm like, all right, we gotta be getting close to that. Look at 42 minutes left. I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, like I mean, literally, like so much stuff happens, and you're like, wow, what else is going to happen in this movie? And you check the time, you're only halfway through. It's like an hour and a half to go. I'm like, what the hell else is going to happen?
And yeah, and, you know, the wife watched a good chunk of it with me. She goes, "This is bizarre. This is weird. I don't know what's going on." I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to know what's going on. And just things got progressively weirder in each chapter.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like each chapter could be its own movie, its own story.
Right. Evidently.
But I mean, overall, I mean, am I upset I watched this? No, not at all. It's just a stupidly long movie, but there's so many interpretations of it. As we discussed, David Lynch, it's like big fish where everything just, as you said, ramped up to 26. You know, like I said, all the stabbings, all these murders, all this stuff. Okay, it's all in this one neighborhood that Beau lives in.
Right.
You know? Yeah, and it's just, you know, it's, you know, is it a metaphor? Is it not? You know, because there's a lot of decapitations in Ari Aster's movies. If you haven't noticed this at this point in time, he has a thing about taking people's heads off. You know, Charlie cut off the bird's head in Hereditary, lots of decapitations in there. And, you know, if you really stop and think about it, you know, the company that the mom worked at was in security systems. So yeah, she is able to plant security systems and follow Beau this entire way. And just, it seemed like a, you know, psychological, emotional abuse. Honestly, at times it felt sexually abusive too.
Yeah, it was uncomfortably weird.
Like, yeah, because she seemed really, really uncomfortably close with her 13-year-old son.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that was my thought. But like I said, you know, we'll go into our highlights and low points, but you need to watch this movie to fully appreciate everything that's in it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much happening, even just in the background. It's like, I don't know what is happening, but this is nuts.
Yeah, so anyone listening, dedicate two nights to this movie.
Well, just 3 hours. Just make sure you have 3 hours. Make sure you know how much time it's going to take.
Yeah. What highlights do you have for this movie?
I mean, I love all that crazy background stuff. I mean, if you're actually paying attention to it, it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder the longer you look at it. Like I said, he's just walking down the street casually, and the people that are behind him are just nuts. I mean, there's like, seriously, there's like a 12-year-old kid, like, you know, disassembling and reassembling an AK-47 just in the middle of the New York street.
Yeah.
And then like right behind him is like this giant guy, like he's got one chocolate ice cream cone in one hand and one vanilla ice cream cone in the other hand. And he keeps licking one, then licking the other, then licking one, then licking the other. And then there's a lady with a sign behind him that says, "I will cut off my own hands."
Right.
It's just so much bizarre, goofy stuff happening. Like, you know, birthday boy stab man. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of naked people running around. I mean, it's interesting. It is for sure interesting, and there's so much happening in the background that it's like, even if you're just trying to focus on the main story, you still catch a lot of it, and it's just nuts.
Yeah.
I really liked the animated play part that they had. Like, he was literally just like doing like a one-man show with like animation for a while.
Oh yeah.
It was very cool. It was very well. It was like, you know, like kind of a cross between like, you know, your typical kind of rotoscoped animation and then like a mix of like, you know, kind of play background styling.
Well, they're like the tree. They even show it in the play thing where the trees were rotating. They'd slowly move away pieces to signify the changes of the season.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was done like play decorations were, but also animated.
Right.
Yeah. It was cool. And I mean, also, I mean, Joaquin Phoenix's performance was amazing. I mean, all of the stuff that he had to do in that movie, all of the different things he had to react to and act through is just crazy. And he did a fantastic job.
Oh, I completely lost the fact is Joaquin Phoenix in the movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he melded into Beau really well. Do you have any other highlights?
No. What about you?
No, I completely agree. It is an art house over exaggeration, and once again, Ari Aster is like has this eye because a lot of the stuff seems like one continuous shot. You know, it's like Beau is the focus pretty much the entire time. I'd say up until like the last scene. You know what I mean? Like a lot of it seems like just a giant long shot. Like everything that's happening, you know, while he's going through the streets, like that to get all that going behind you is absurd. You know, to have in a shot. And I thought it was art, you know, really for being art house, it very much shows, and just the atmosphere of it, you know, was there. And I said, and you know, Beau is very timid, and Beau is afraid. You know, we find out what the answer to what he's afraid of is climaxing.
Among other things, he's just scared of a lot of things.
Right. And, you know, it kind of shows and really shows that he wasn't the, you know, I am the main character. He's just there in his own life as as a supporting role. His mother really is the architect, the director of his own life. Yeah, I thought it was really done, and just just having a lot to think about. It is something you need to probably watch more than once.
You catch everything, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, and you could catch other things. And, you know, as we point out, the David Lynch style is how much of this is true, how much is it real, how much is imaginary. Like, and we can say this right now. You know, we can say, hey, his dad, the giant penis monster, would be a part of his imagination, except Jeeves gets killed by it.
Right.
So maybe it's in his head, maybe it's not. It chose to not, considering another person interacted with it. Although Jeeves was probably dead from getting shot all that time through the chest.
Again, who knows? You don't know because the movie's all over the place. There's no way to know. Right.
So, yeah, overall, like I said, it is a solid watch. It's long, but it's a solid watch. How about low points for you?
Low points, they show him heating up a frozen dinner early in the movie. Now, the frozen dinner is called Olay's, the best of Ireland and Hawaii. And I'm like, what? So it's like pineapples and potatoes was the meal, and I'm like, that sounds absolutely disgusting.
Yes.
Let's see. I mean, Big Lowe's. I mean, his mom is a horrible person.
Yes.
I mean, it just, Jesus. I mean, I can't imagine suffering under a controlling mom of that level for like 40 whatever years, however old poor Beau is.
Right.
And that penis monster, man. That penis monster was disturbing. I did not like that penis monster. It was worse than the penis monster in Romeo and Juliet. Did you ever see that movie?
Wow, yeah.
It was worse than that penis monster.
Yeah. You know, poor Parker Posey. She looks great at 54. I'm just going to say that right now.
She really does.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine, you know, that seems to be a new common theme that we're seeing in horror movies is people dying inside other people during sex.
Well, I think it's a big fear of people in general.
Right. That'd be horrifying.
Well, yeah, I imagine it would be.
I guess his therapist was supposed to be creepy, but he like got really creepy.
I don't think he was creepy. He was just like, he had a smile on his face like all the time, but he never did anything like overtly like scary or anything. He
Right.
did like he always acted and spoke as if he was a nice therapist.
Yeah,
He just
clearly he was paid off.
Well, yeah, obviously, yeah. But even though he was paid off, he was still making good points, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the little points, like it's almost like a Cronenberg penis monster.
For sure, yeah.
So, no, that's I said that's about it. I mean, could it have been shorter? Probably, but.
Oh, again, I mean, it was a vision that he had. He wanted to do the whole thing, and he definitely did. So,
yeah. Why don't you go first for Primal Screams? I'm interested in this because I know supposedly this is a box office flop.
I can see that because this is probably a lot of money to make.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's kind of like a Wes Anderson thing, right? Wes Anderson movies really don't make a lot of money, but people like them. Yeah, there's a lot of people that enjoy them enough to where he keeps getting money to make more movies, and he keeps getting very, very famous people to be in his movies, but they're not like big hits normally. I don't know about Asteroid City. I heard that it was a bigger hit than it normally is, but I know there was a lot of talk there for a while. They were talking about maybe not even giving him money to make more movies.
Right.
I mean, whatever. But it kind of feels like that kind of thing. It's a movie that is a great movie, but it's not for everyone.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's kind of thing. So I will go. I mean, I'll give it 8.5 Primal Screams out of 10. I think I enjoyed it about as much as I enjoyed Hereditary, but I think it's just a bit under Midsommar.
That's fair. Yeah, I thought with it being that long that maybe I would get distracted. I thought that maybe the head cold I'm fighting would make it hard for me to pay close attention to all this stuff. And I didn't have that problem. And it drew me, is it horror in the same way that other things are horror from Ari Aster we've seen? No, it's not. But the controllingness, the paranoia is there. It's a psychological thriller or psychological horror. It's that controllingness of being there. Do I like it as much as Hereditary and Midsommar? I didn't, but it's still a good movie. So for me, I'm also getting 8.5 Primal Screams out of 10. Still a good movie, without a doubt. I'm going to watch it again at some point in time. I know if I watch it with the wife, we're definitely going to split that up into two nights. Like, all right, I know where the acts of the movie are.
Yeah, I mean, again, it does.
Out.
Yeah, it does have like pretty definitive, like different acts. So there's like 4 different acts of the movie.
Right.
So yeah, you can very easily just watch the first 2, have a clean break, and then watch the second 2.
Yes. Yeah. So, anything else you want to add to this? What we're calling our palate cleanser from the 3 weeks of the Conjuring world.
Oh, jeez. Well, I mean, at least we went out of the Conjuring world on the best ones, which is not saying a whole lot, but
no.
But yes, it was nice to watch some actual good movies.
Yeah,
for sure.
We'll continue this hopeful journey. I haven't watched number 2 of this in a very long time, but next week join us as we adventure into the witchy side of Maryland as we cover the currently all 3 Blair Witch movies. Did the move from found footage to cinematic, then back to found footage hurt or help the franchise? Because anyone who has seen it, 1, found footage, 2, Book of Shadows, straight up movie, and then we go back to the original Blair Witch style with the Blair Witch. Again, they call it the same thing, didn't they?
I think
Or
the first
Blair
one
Witch
is
Project.
the first one is like the Blair Witch Project,
Blair Witch
and
Project.
the last one is just the Blair Witch.
Right. So who is lost in the woods, and what time is it really? We'll discuss all this and more next time. And remember, we watch bad movies, so you don't have to. And this has been Graveyard saying, have you checked on the children?
This is Salem saying, long live the new flesh.
Good night.
Good night.